All right, we're live. Good morning, Calvin.
Good morning.
We're just going to give it about 2 minutes. We'll do a little chit chat here before we launch. How's the day going? Do you have snow in Chicago yet? And let's ask this question. Are you going to have a white Christmas?
Well, we had a ton of snow. So this was I think the most snow we had in 10 years or something like that by this time of year. And then it was also like the coldest snap we've had in a long time.
Oh,
But
yeah.
then yesterday it decided to rain on the snow. So we
Oh,
had, you
lovely.
know, 12 inches of snow. Now it's 6.5 of snow and mud.
And snow and mud. And that's when working remotely is a good thing.
Oh, indeed, indeed.
As I
But
imagine there's a little ice on the roads too, which is always
well,
scary.
it's warm enough now that again it's going to continue to melt for a little while. I don't know if it's going to be a cold snap again,
Yeah.
but
Well, it's going to be warm here. No snow in the in the actual Midwest. But the wind is crazy. There were like winds of 120 miles an hour in Wyoming
wow.
yesterday, and Colorado had all kinds of problems too. So, um, looking forward to Christmas, whether we have snow or not. If anybody's online and you want to tell us where you're at, if you're going to have snow for Christmas, we'd love to hear that. Or whatever you celebrate, because we're in the middle of Hanukkah and there's many other celebrations going on right now.
Indeed.
Yes. Well, I tell you what, why don't we get rolling? Because I know we have a lot to talk about today. So, for those of you who are joining us live, welcome. If you're watching the replay, also welcome. So far, this is our fourth episode of the channel chat. And really, the goals of these videos is to educate the trusted advisor community about things going on and specifically around cloud and cloud strategies. And so we have been focused, and this will be our fourth month, around cloud rebalancing because there's a lot going on with cloud providers. So, the first episode, we talked a lot about what's going on in the public cloud, what public cloud providers are doing as they're constantly coming out with new features. They're also doing a lot to impact their costs. And what is the impact on that doing to users of public cloud? We talked a lot about that on the first episode. Second episode, we talked about Akamai Cloud. We talked with Akamai about what they've been doing to extend their services beyond the content delivery network and security into providing another alternative for infrastructure to help with those customers that are looking to do some rebalancing. And then last month, we spoke with a provider that's taking that infrastructure layer to the next level for modernization, and that's working with containers and Kubernetes. And what the impact is having with customers that are using container technology to help them unlock this stuck feeling that they get into, that we're going to talk a little bit more about today as well, and give them more freedom to really put a strategy together that fits their business requirements. So today we're going to be doing some summarizing of that. We're going to be talking with Calvin Vass, and Calvin has been talking with customers. He talks with advisors all the time. So he's going to have a lot of really good insight for us today. So Calvin, let me toss it to you to do a proper introduction and talk a little bit about your role at Avant.
Indeed, Vicki, thanks for having me this morning. Really appreciate it. So, Calvin Bass, long time in the channel, lots of years, lots of different roles too. I started as an account manager at CDW, so a seller, kind of the front lines. But I migrated through marketing, market research, corporate strategy, did all kinds of things within the outside of the technical side. And so when I was supporting the corporate strategy motion, I was looking at public cloud as one of my areas. And I was like, wow, this has really got some potential. So if you go back 10, 12 years ago, right, it's still relatively new to the channel. And so I was like, hey, this is an area we really need to lean into. And so I asked to be able to, participate and kind of, start setting up some of those practices. So help build the AWS, Azure, Google practices. And then we had done a lot of acquisitions, over the last couple of years, and I've switched over to marketplace. So that was, kind of previous history on that. About a year ago, I moved over to Avant, and very excited to be here. And kind of it's a different lens to look through. But all that work that I did on cloud and things like that is really, it's just a different different side of the industry. So it's exciting to be here. And again, as Vicki had kind of foreshadowed here, we have lots of conversations with both our trusted advisors and the end clients, and kind of helping them navigate the new world out there.
Yeah, so that's awesome, because that's where we really get the feedback that we need on what's going on in the market and in the industry. So with your work with the advisors and customers, there's a lot of underlying reasons why customers are reevaluating their IT strategy, and specifically their cloud strategy. And it's not always just about cost. There's a lot of other things out there. What are you hearing?
Yep. And I want to set the stage here for this too. So I'm a big AWS fan. So I was an AWS ambassador, one of the first 40 in the world, had lots of certs. And, I spent a lot of time shutting down data centers and moving things up to AWS in particular. And that's going to continue. There's going to be a lot of, business going towards the public cloud. And so we are definitely keeping a pulse on that. I think if you are a net new business just getting started out, I mean, it's obvious you start in the cloud, right? You don't want to put a big capital expenditure out. If you want to get going quick, public cloud is the way to go. But when you kind of look out there, there's some customers that are looking just at costs in general. And one of the things that comes up and say, hey, we have a lot of cloud spend. Let's look at that. So folks are reevaluating their investments and how they're going to market. Broadcom/VMware had some impact on the market as well. People are looking at that. So there's this kind of this shifting around on a lot of different planes. And then you put AI on top of that, right? So there's just a lot of new, and customers are looking at ways to, can I maybe save some money over here so I can do something over there, kind of thing. But I think in general, everybody's looking at costs and managing those. So that's the headline, right? People are kind of looking at, how do I save money somewhere? But to your point, in terms of the cloud rebalancing, if you're in public cloud, some other issues may come up, right? So data sovereignty, data governance, is pretty big. Some latency, right? If you have an application that maybe is not ideal for public cloud, you might have, I have cost concerns and it's not performing the way I would like it, or expansion, or, different ways kind of to look at things. And I would say kind of in general, because, this public cloud was such a magnet for so long, everybody that wasn't public cloud, right? Hardware vendors, data center providers, colo providers, they had to adjust, right? So kind of cost came down over there. So there was a time when, on-prem versus public cloud, there's a big difference in cost. Now those hardware providers have really kind of stepped up the game. So again, it's kind of like cost gets the headlines, but it's all these other things too that come into play.
Yeah. And another thing that you did not mention, but we've been seeing and we've talked about it, is especially with companies that are either software developers or they're developing applications internally for their internal customer base, is they did jump into cloud for all the reasons you talked about. And they're happy with it. It's just not performing the way, and they want to remediate, it's not performing the way they want it to. They've got some concern around security. So they're reevaluating what they did, and having, like an Aptum come in and look at their environment, help them remediate, and then help them stay in a remediated state so they can meet their goals they want to meet. So that's another one that I've been seeing too.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at what the public cloud is really good at, and this was from a study from Broadcom. So the number one thing that came up in terms of what do customers like about public cloud, it's scalability, right?
Yeah.
Easy to scale, right? And you can scale up, scale down. If you got a busy time of year, but you don't need that kind of capacity all year round, scale back down. So that's awesome, right? The ability to scale up when you need to is a great benefit. However, because it's so easy to scale, have companies lost sight on, just workload efficiency, right?
Yeah.
Is it optimized so that you don't have to use so many resources? When it's easy to spin up, spin down, maybe it kind of overflex there. Right. And some of the other things that kind of come into play too is the reliable performance. Again, customers rate public cloud as very performant, right?
Yeah.
But
Right.
the way that public clouds do that is because they have standards, right? So if your data compression, your data dedupe or something like that is different than what the cloud standards are, you can kind of get into some situations where, again, performance is not what you want it to be. But I think there's
Yeah.
always going to be workloads that really are really right for public cloud, and some that maybe may find other homes.
Yeah, for sure. So that's where the rebalancing conversation, that's what people are thinking about. But then as you're talking to the leaders, the CFOs, the CIOs, the CEOs who are very involved in the IT side of their business, they're running into those challenges. So what obstacles are you seeing at that level?
Yep. Well, so there are lots of challenges, right? So let's say an organization's cloud first for 10 years, right? So the staff that they have today probably doesn't remember the data center that they used to manage, right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of this skill gap, and in a lot of cases, because of all the reasons that public cloud is really performant and easier to use, they like that, right? Because they can focus on other things that they perceive to be adding value. So there's always going to be kind of this situation where maybe some of the knowledge has been lost, but hey, maybe I want to stay on the cloud. CFO is saying, I don't, maybe we can reduce our costs, but
Yeah.
I kind of like it here. So all different flavors of that. So I think, when people take a look at what their cloud expenses are, right, they can do a back of the envelope and say, wow, if we moved over here, we got this quote on this, blob storage provider, object store provider, and wow, look at what we could save, right? So there could be some things like that where it's just like, wow, we could save some money here. But then you think, well, do we have all the right people to support that? Like if we do make that move, right? We don't have somebody that's good at data center anymore. Maybe we don't have somebody that's good at managing containers, because that again is all the kind of the work that the public cloud was doing for them. So I think number one is just kind of get to the point where you do have a good idea of what the savings would be and that it's worth pursuing. Plus you have to uncover those internal hurdles. And I got more to say, but I can go back to you, Vicki, for any clarifying questions.
Yeah, no, that's good. And one of the things that is always top of mind with them too is risk. What is the risk of us making those changes so that we can meet those goals? And that's
100%.
something that they're always going to be thinking about. So when we're talking to our customers about that, we have to really uncover what the real concerns are. What do they think the risk is? What do they think the cost is? Those are the kind of things that not everybody in an advisory role from our trusted advisor community is always comfortable having that conversation, right?
Oh, indeed. And the risk officer, has stopped a couple of the deals that we were working on, and everything was moving along, right? And so and it got to the point where somebody looked at that and said,
Yeah.
"Wait a second, right? We got this VMware thing going on. We don't really have the staff. We're talking about all these changes. We're not really good at managing the databases or whatever, managing the hardware. This is too much risk for us." And so somebody very high up in the organization will put an end to it, even if there's momentum from IT, from finance, and some of these other areas. So I just want to call out that there's different flavors of this, though. I think all of us as business owners, business leaders, whatever we are, have an obligation to kind of look at those expenses and keep those expenses down so we can continue to add value to the customers, right? So there's different flavors of this. You don't have to exit the cloud completely. Maybe it's, let's look at my workloads and optimize those, and they can stay there. And maybe that savings that I get on optimizing allows me to do some other things. Maybe I can do some AI stuff or whatever, purchase some things on AWS Marketplace. Right. So there's that flavor. There's some kind of like replatforming that you can do, looking at maybe new database engines. There's certainly a lot of savings in terms of automation and things like that. And especially now, we mentioned licenses, right? Some licenses has gotten really expensive. Like, how do you optimize the usage of those licenses? So I think kind of looking at that cost control, or looking through that cost control lens, like there's different areas, but there's a point at which somebody says it's too risky to do this. We'll continue to do what we're doing because of X, Y, Z, but let's save as much money as we can. Let's be as efficient as we can be. So it's not all, let's move completely out of the cloud. Some of it could even be, let's move our object storage out.
Yep. Let's start small. Let's look at it. And that's, the next thing I wanted to dive into, but I also want to quick break is just if anybody has any questions, feel free to put those in the comments. We'll absolutely get back to you. We'll address them here. So a lot of the challenges we've just been talking about, risk, cost, the big AI project that's looming, these all of a sudden people just sort of freeze and say, okay, we're stuck. So what's the best approach to getting unstuck? How do we want to guide our customers to get to make that first move? Like you just said, let's look at one workload. How do we do that?
Yep. And just kind of revisit where I think a lot of folks get stuck from our conversations was they do that back of the envelope. Maybe they have some naysayers still in the audience, but it's kind of like, if we can save 50%, we have to pursue it. As officers of the company, we have a fiduciary responsibility to kind of take a look at this, right? And so then what's that next step? And to me, it's all about building up confidence. And I talk about having a fully loaded view of this, which means are all the expenses that you need to incur to do this included? And that's usually the biggest gap that people have. Easy to kind of understand the savings. Like I'm here today, I'm over here, it's going to look like this. How do I get from A to B, right? If maybe it changes the storage software that I need to use. Maybe I have some additional licenses that I need to use. Maybe I'm going to lose something because of I did all my AI in some public cloud tools, and maybe if I'm exiting, I have to kind of figure that all out on my own. So figuring out all those costs, hardware costs, software costs, looking at power, connectivity, all those pieces, but then also looking at if you're going to manage your own environment, what kind of people do you need to hire and where? If you're locations all over the world, you need to hire somebody in Singapore. What is a database, storage specialist, cost in Singapore, right? You have all those costs. And I think when you pull that all together and have the detail and say, here's your block storage, you need some high performance, some regular performance, and this is how many gigs you need, and you need this many nodes and these kind of things. You can then put that into a giant model that does take into account. And somebody says, well, did you think about this? And you can say, yeah, we did think about that. Here it is. We did take into account that power in the US is cheaper than power in Asia, right? It's $150 here, $300 a kilowatt hour over there, right? So it's kind of like, you do need to take all those into account. To me, it builds confidence. And then again, this is the work you and I, Vicki, have done too, which is you build that model, and as you build, you learn, right? So you have to iterate on the model and change the model. And if your HR says, oh, it doesn't cost $150K for that person, it's $175K or $75K, right? They might be lower. Being able to adjust that or say, hey, there's this new technology that was launched. We went from processor A to processor B, and look, we don't need as many servers then, right? All those things kind of has to be iterative, and people have to have confidence. So if, when one team is in charge of object storage, right, can they look at that and say, yeah, these are all the pieces? That's where you need to get to, and that builds the confidence to take people to the next step.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that sounds like an assessment to me, right? It's getting in there and assessing all the things you talked about. It's looking at the infrastructure. It's looking at the network layer. It's looking at the security. It's looking at the platform layer that is allowing us to gather that information and be able to collect it and give it back to the customer in a meaningful way. Now, customers can do this on their own. Sometimes it's good to have a third party looking at it from an outsider's point of view, plus knowing what a lot of other companies are doing and having a lot of deep expertise around those different technologies. So what about the Aptum approach where we've been working together has been resonating with you and with customers?
And resonating is absolutely the right word. And again, to me, it's about customer confidence. Do they feel confident in the work that we did, that they can make business decisions that could positively impact their business, or, if it doesn't work out, negatively impact? Do they have all the information that they need? And so kind of that approach I described is like looking at like the what's under the hood. So let's say somebody's using Google Big Table, right? So if you ever use like a Google service like that, you push more data in and your bill gets bigger, right? And that's what's underneath that. Right. Like, so if you have to unpack that and build that in, the physical world, how many servers do you need? What kind of networking do you need? What does your storage look like? What's your, block store look like? So you really have to kind of unpack that at a really granular level. And that's the work that Aptum has done with us very effectively in not only kind of getting into the levels of that detail, the technical specs, also looking at the risks, right? So if you're in public cloud, but you have something, let's say in Asia today, but now you need to have a data center in Asia today. What's the geopolitical situation over there? Is this a stable environment? What's the earthquake risk? What is the risk of power outages, right? So taking all those into account. So there's the technical part of it, and then it's also the business part of it too. We have to cover all that. And Aptum does an excellent job of just checking all those boxes, right? That is really has been impressive.
That's so good, because then the customer has all the data they need to make the decisions on the way forward. And that's what gets them unstuck. And it can be built on, okay, we're not going to tackle this all at once. Here's the areas where the least amount of risk is, and the highest potential for success. Let's go target those. And then those next steps are helping to build that plan on how to get them to where they're trying to go. So that's, to me, that's what's most important for the customer, is them having the data that they need and that expert advice to point them in the right direction.
Absolutely. And just to kind of even continue on from that kind of that initial assessment where you say, hey, this is what it looks like in public cloud. Now here's the Aptum work that shows you what it would look like, let's say in a colo with managed infrastructure. That's what it's going to look like over here. So then you have your costs kind of lined up. Next phase is like, okay, so that's something on paper, right? What do we do next? Next phase is to kind of design the production environment. What does the production environment actually look like? So we go from kind of like theoreticals a little bit to like, okay, now we have to look at what servers need to be bought and things like that.
Right.
And really kind of scope that out. So next phase is kind of like building that production, the full production environment. What does that look like? From that, then you build your proof of concept, right? Let's say you have locations all over the world. To technically prove it, you really just need one site. Like, hey, start directing a little bit of traffic over there, see what happens. Is it going to perform the way that you expect it to? So, often that can be kind of a light touch too. So again, go from doing the assessment, design the production environment, design the POC, then do a POC, right? So then maybe you have one location that you start off with. You say, okay, it was working well over here. How's it working in Singapore, right? So you got to do a POC over there. And start kind of building that out. But these are all checkpoints, right? And this is another way we inspire business with the end clients and the TAs, which is this is the path. This is the journey. At any point, you start a POC and it kind of blows up, doesn't work the way you expect it to. You invested in the assessment, you invested in the design, but now you can say, okay, this didn't work. Okay, we're not going to do it. Now we can go back to our board or our shareholders and say, we looked at this, it's not viable. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the way to kind of shut down that conversation.
Yeah.
And then the investors can't say, well, have you looked at that? And you can say, yeah, we did. It's not viable for us.
Yeah. We did a small little chunk and it's not viable. Or either that or you pivot and try a different chunk that has a better opportunity to succeed. So, and then after that is the whole ongoing support. Who does that? Is it co-done between the managed services provider and the customer? Does the customer want to take it over? Does the managed services provider cover the gap? That's what we do a lot. Cover that talent gap that they have so everything runs smoothly. So,
for sure. And let's talk about that for a second. Or were you going to wrap us up?
Yeah, no. We have like 6 minutes. So we'll finish this and then we're going to talk about the TAs some more. So finish your thought, Calvin.
Yeah. So in terms of, again, building that confidence. So think about it in terms of, being able to walk through the steps that we did. And you got the chief risk officer saying, okay, is this thing really going to work? It builds up confidence there too, which is, you kind of have to bring everybody along for the journey. And again, by doing the approach that we did, coworker services, HR, whatever you call it at your company, right, may need to say, okay, we need to ramp up our staff so we can hire, these additional people. And maybe these are not roles that we would hire before. Maybe we have to work with new agencies to find those people. So there's work to be done by having this iterative approach where you're walking everybody through it and getting their feedback along the way, then they're prepared for it. But if you do kind of, if they pull back and say, hey, look, this is not viable for us, what do they have? They have kind of their blueprint to say, hey, public cloud provider, this is what we can do here. Let's negotiate on, what my bill looks like. Or maybe you can help us optimize our things so we kind of look more like that, right? And so
Yeah.
it gives them that ammo. So it gives them a lot of different ways to pivot for sure. The last point I want to make on this is, this was news to me. I came from a different world, right? So like if I'm figuring out connectivity and stuff, like I'm pushing buttons in the AWS console and say, I want to do cross-region replication. Like I don't have to worry about the pipes. Those are all new things that we have to worry about. And that's going to cause concerns for people. And they'd say, okay, we're not ready to manage that. Again, I don't even know how to hire the people that would manage that because it's been so long since we did. So the managed environments is very popular too for the folks that are really have been cloud first for a long time. If they're, they're used to managing their data, their applications, and some aspects of security, and they don't pay attention to the rest of the stuff because they don't have to. So you can get that same experience. I call it a cloud-like experience with, let's say, Colo with managed infrastructure and a whole team that's managing all that. If you just want to get served up containers or virtual machines or whatever, right, there's a way to do that. The secret sauce on this is because of all this, the additional economies of scale and the way that it can pool resources and stuff like that. It can often be less expensive for to use the managed services than to have the folks do it themselves. Like to go out there and buy those servers, right? The managed services providers get much better deal than you do. Again, to have all those people in your data center just managing your stuff, they're sharing resources, right? So there's efficiency there. There's efficiency in terms of license sharing and things like that and swapping out. Like if you're scaling up and scaling down, do you really need all those licenses year round, or can you just pull from that pool? So it can actually be less expensive to use that managed approach. And then again, that makes people feel better. That chief risk officer says, okay, this is different, but we're giving it to the experts, right? The experts are doing that. So that reduces my risk profile.
Right. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And that could be the topic of another episode of the channel chat, because we can talk a lot about that. It truly is an end-to-end journey. It's that assessment, the design, and then helping migrate to that new environment and run it. So it really is a whole journey. So as we're wrapping up today, you and I both work a lot with trusted advisors, a lot of people that haven't been in the cloud space like you and I have been for a long time. So what questions do you ask your prospects, and do we want our advisors asking their prospects to uncover these kind of opportunities around their cloud strategies?
Yep. And I think asking the question is a great way to go about it, right? And, if you're meeting with them to talk about their UCaaS solution, just ask them questions like, what do you think, how are you managing your other environments? Do you have public cloud? How's that working out for you? The ones that have something on their mind, I'll say, usually are pretty talkative, right? But you got to ask the question because they don't maybe know that that's within your wheelhouse and that you do have the resources to actually help them with it. Because again, it's a different world.
Right.
And so I think opening up those that is really the important thing. And again, I think you ask about workloads, what's working for you, what's not. And often you'll get to a pretty quickly of it costs too much. It was X this year, now it's 2X. Okay, that's a problem. And again, with all the other uncertainty around VMware and AI, like what's our AI strategy, or I need to save money so I can do some AI, save some budget. It's really, if you go in there with kind of an workload efficiency set of questions of, questions around what's your pain points, that will usually get you there pretty quickly. And so once you kind of get somebody saying, hey, public cloud is not what I need it to be right today, I mean, that's pretty much all you need. They've opened the door to that conversation. We'll help you bring in the experts like Aptum. And there's lots of different solutions out there. Again, a lot of customers I see are struggling with, what's my VMware alternative? And I got to save money on cloud, or I got to roll out this whole new thing that I'm not sure how to roll out this new application or workload. So I'd say get in there, ask questions about where are your pain points. And a lot of times it'll land somewhere in there. Everybody's trying to save money unless they got, like a startup that just got a boatload of money, then they're growing. Everybody else is kind of like, how do we do things more efficiently?
Right. And I always tell people too, when you're talking to your customers about their cybersecurity projects and their AI projects, I mean, the underlying foundation is the infrastructure. When you're talking about those things, you're talking about everything around IT. You're talking about the network. We heard at Special Forces about how, the network is cool again, telecom is cool again because of all of this data going around these multi-cloud environments and these hybrid cloud environments. And so get in, you're talking to specific business unit owners around, the network, around cyber. You might be talking to the CISO. You may be, an AI. You're talking to the highest levels. Well, guess what? They've got to be looking at their cloud strategy. So ask them, how are these projects you're looking at impacting your cloud strategy? And that also gets you right into that conversation. So,
Yep.
um,
I'm gonna add one more thing. I know we're at time. Here's the other thing,
okay.
right? Everybody hears about the scarcity of data center, power. Basically, power is the thing. Everybody needs the power, right?
Yes,
And
everyone.
so the other thing that you need to talk to your clients about, like if they are considering some sort of move, to like a colo situation, you got to get ahead of that, right? The
Yes.
space is getting snapped up left and right. You got these companies that have like Neo Clouds or something. They're bringing something online. It's already sold out by the time it's live.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so you're going to be guiding your customer in a way that's super beneficial to them by saying, hey, we got to get going on this now. Because if you want to be doing this be in someplace else in 2 years, now is the time to have the conversation, not a year and a half from now.
Exactly. Exactly. So we are at time. I told you this 30 minutes goes by super fast, but thank you. This has been such valuable conversation, and I'm excited to work with you more going into 26. For people listening, if you want more information, you can go to your Avant support team or come to myself directly, and love to carry on these conversations with you. So, Calvin, thank you so much. Have a wonderful holiday season, and I'll be chatting with you real soon.
Yeah, Vicki, thanks for having me, and everybody, happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays.